Hey y'all, my name is Max. I'm an instructor at Youth Code Jam, and today we're going to go through the third part of our dunk contest game using Scratch. So you'll first want to make sure that you've done the first two parts, and you can go to spursgive.org/coding, and that'll take you to this website where you can scroll down and find all of the instructions for week 1 and week 2. There are video tutorials just like this one, and step-by-step guides in English and in Spanish in PDF form. So you can use whichever way you want to learn how to code this, but go through all the steps for week 1 and week 2, and then you'll be ready for this video. So once you have gone through all of those steps, what you'll do is you'll head on over to Scratch at scratch.mit.edu, and that will take you to the Scratch homepage. So once you're on the Scratch homepage, you want to make sure that you're signed into your account, and then you want to find the project that you've been working on for the past 2 weeks. So the parts 1 and 2 project. So you can click on the little icon of the file folder here, or you can click on your username and go to My Stuff. It'll take you to the same place. And then you'll find your project that you were working on and click on See Inside. And that will take you to your workspace here. And you can see we've already got the code for weeks 1 and 2. It's quite a bit. We coded all of this in 2 weeks. And then also there was a little bit of code on our scorekeeper. What we're doing this week is we're going to make a little bit more involved trick that's a little bit flashier. And then also we'll do an adventure mode where you can create your own trick. So let's get started on our third trick, since we already created the front flip and the back flip. And we can use the way that we created tricks in the past as sort of a model for this. So we started with this define block, which we need to create ourselves. So if you go to My Blocks and click on Make a Block, this is going to be kind of a wild trick, so I'm going to call this Go Wild, but you can call this anything you want, and once you're done naming it, you can click on OK, and that will put a Define Go Wild block onto your workspace. So drag that block wherever you want to code, and then we'll get started coding. So just like last time, we used an if-then block to sort of ask the computer a question. So we're going to go to Control and grab that if-then block. And then in the pointy space inside of this if-then block, we'll need an operator block. So in the operators palette here, you can find an equals block, and it has 2 spaces for values, and in between them there's an equal. So on the left side of this, we want to put a dunking block, the rounded dunking block from our variables. So we want to check to see if our variable dunking is equal to yes. And then it'll be okay for our Coyote to do the trick. Because we gain points, we don't want to be able to do this trick when we're not dunking. The next thing that we'll do is we'll set up some values for our trick. So we want to change our points variable. So from the variables palette here, we want to get the change block, and we want to change our points by 10. Don't forget to change, by default it'll say dunking as your variable name. You want to use the drop down and select points. And then the next thing we'll do is we will play a sound. So we're going to get the start sound block to play a sound. And on this one, we'll use the magic spell sound. Our next block that we need is going to be a block that we find in events, and it's a broadcast block. So we've used this block before to broadcast a score to our scorekeeper sprite. This time we're going to broadcast a message to our star sprite. So once you have that broadcast block, you can click on where it says score or the little drop down arrow and select new message. And we can call this message Go Wild. and then click OK. Again, that's something you can name anything you want, but it makes sense that the Go Wild trick is sending a Go Wild message. Okay, so now that our trick is set up, we can do the actual part of the actual trick, which is going to be changing the color of the Coyote sprite. So we're going to get a repeat block. So you can find this block in the control palette on the left. And instead of 10, we want to put the value 5 here. So we're going to repeat some code 5 times. And inside of this repeat 5, we're going to get a block from looks that says change color effect by 25. And you can put whatever number you want instead of this 25, but I'm going to use the number 40. And then our next step is to do this again, but in reverse, so that we end up with the default colors for the Coyote sprite. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can go back into control and grab another repeat block, and then looks and grab another change color block. But you can also right click the repeat block and duplicate, and this will make it a little bit faster, and that'll make a copy of those 2 blocks for you. So where you want to place them is inside of the if then block still, but outside of this. You don't want this to be inside of the repeat like this. You want it to be outside of the other repeat, but still inside the big if then block. And then all you have to do is change this number from positive 40 to negative 40 or minus 40. So you'll add a minus sign in front of there, and then that'll allow our color to go back to the default Coyote colors. Awesome. So the next thing that we want to do is control our star sprite, because we sent this message and we want to go receive it in our star sprite. So in the bottom right in your sprites pane, click on the star sprite, and it'll look like all your code has gone away, but don't worry, it's still there. It just lives in the Coyote sprite, just like when we did it with the scorekeeper. So you don't have any code yet for your star sprite. The first block of code that you'll need is in events, you'll grab a when green flag clicked. And we want to make sure that our star is hidden until we actually call on it for this trick. So in the looks palette over on the left, you will grab a block that says hide. So it'll keep this star hidden from view. And later we'll show this block. But first we want to make sure that when we start our project, the star sprite is hidden. And the next thing that we want to do is make sure that we have the correct positioning for the star sprite. So forever, we'll get a forever block. And we want to forever make sure that it's kind of attached to the Coyote sprite. So in motion, we're going to grab a block that says glide 1 second to random position, but we're going to change random position to Coyote, and then we're going to make this a really short amount of time. So instead of 1 whole second, we are going to make it 0.05 seconds, which is a really tiny amount of time. So essentially, it'll just be stuck to the Coyote. The next thing that we want to do is decide what happens when we do receive that Go Wild message from our Coyote sprite. So in events, there is a block that says, when I receive Go Wild. So we'll get that block and you can put it anywhere on your workspace. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to make some clones of this sprite. So instead of making a bunch of star sprites, if we want more stars, we can just make clones of this one star sprite. And the way we can do that is when I receive Go Wild, we'll repeat. You need a repeat block so we can repeat this code. And we'll do 5 stars. The next block that you'll need is in control as well. But it's all the way down at the bottom, and it says create clone of myself. And that way, the star sprite will create 5 copies of itself whenever it receives that message, go wild. So whenever we do that trick on the Coyote. The next thing that we need to do is decide what happens with the clones when they get created. So the first thing that we'll need is this when I start as a clone block, and it's in the control palette over here right above the last block that we used. And you can put this block anywhere on your space here. So when I start as a clone, we're going to point the sprites in random directions. So all our stars are going to point in different directions. So we're going to get this block from motion that says point in direction 90. And we'll attach that underneath the when I start as a clone block. But we don't want to just point in one direction. We want to point in some random directions. So in operators, you can find this block that has rounded edges that says pick random. So we'll get that block and drop it inside of the value space in the point and direction block. And then we'll change the values in the pick random. Right now it says 1 to 10, but we'll change this to -90 or -90 to 90. And that'll cover all the directions for us. Our next step is going to be setting up some of the looks of our star sprite. So the first thing that we'll need to do is go to the looks palette and get a block that says set size to 100%. And we're going to change this to 50% so that the stars are not too big compared to the Coyote. And then what we'll need is we'll need a block that says go to back layer. And this will, it'll by default, it'll say go to front layer. It's also in looks, but we want to change the front to back using the dropdown. And what this block will do is it'll make sure that the stars stay behind the Coyote or any other sprites at this point. And then finally, still from the looks palette, we can get the block that says show. So at this point, our stars will finally show. And then what we can do is decide what they do once they're being shown. For that, we're going to repeat some code. So we'll grab the repeat 10 block, and we can leave it at 10 this time. And then the next thing we want to do is spread the stars out a little bit. So in motion, we'll get the block that says move 10 steps, and we'll change it from 10 to 5 steps. Again, you can play around with this number. And then we want, after the stars get created and start moving, we want them to kind of change in size a little bit and kind of get smaller. So we're going to go to looks and get the change size. And instead of 10 here, we're going to replace this value with -2. So this will happen 10 times. And our last step here, if you want, you can change the color, just like we did with the Coyote. So we'll change color effect, that's also found in looks, by 10. And this is another number that you can play around with, but it'll happen pretty quickly. Finally, the last thing that we need for the star sprite is to delete this clone. And so we don't have to reset the color back to its original, the star's original color, because we're just going to delete that clone. So if you go into control and scroll all the way down to the bottom of control, you'll find a block that says delete this clone, and you can set that outside of this repeat 10. So that's the very last thing our clone will do, is delete itself. Awesome. So now we should be able to test this out. If we click the green flag and go into the Coyote sprite, we don't have a button to press yet, but you can still test it out by clicking the space bar, pressing the space bar, and then clicking the define go wild block. And that should change the color and everything, and it'll also shoot off the stars, which is exactly what we wanted. So let's add this to a key so that we don't have to click on this define go wild block to use this trick. So just like we did with our previous week's tricks, we're going to set up our trick like this. So we'll get from events, we'll get a when green flag pressed. And then we'll need to ask the computer that question, is that key being pressed? But before that, we need a forever block because we need this to constantly be asking that question. So now that you have the forever and the if then block, we need the sensing block to see if that key is being pressed. So we'll grab this block from the sensing palette over here that says key space pressed, and it's got a question mark on it. And we need to change this space since we already used the space key to, we'll use the right arrow key for this trick. And then the final block that you need for this trick is the Go Wild block that you made, and you can find that in the My Blocks palette over here on the left. So you'll get the Go Wild block and put it inside of the if statement here. And now that that is done, we can test out our project. So we'll click the green flag, I'll press the space bar and then the right arrow key. And you can see it's a pretty wild trick. There's stars going everywhere, which is pretty cool. So you have 3 awesome tricks that you've created now, but you do have 1 extra arrow key that you can use. So if you do go back to the Spurs website here at spursgive.org/coding and get that PDF, there's a template for a trick that you can use as an example. So I'll show you what that looks like here. There's some question marks in here where you can fill in whatever kind of code you want to. So you can choose whatever sound you want to. You can name your trick whatever you want to. But it does follow that same structure that we've used for our other tricks, where we define a block and put a bunch of code into our new block, and then run that new block whenever an arrow key is pressed. So that's one way that you can do that. Obviously, you can make as many tricks as you want to. There's lots of keys on your keyboard to choose from other than just the arrow keys. So you can make, whatever your imagination can do, you can make a trick for. And I can't wait to see everybody's tricks that they make. So go ahead and do some exploring. You can use this as a template if you want to. And then once you're done creating your own tricks, what we want you to do is share your game with us. So we've created a studio on Scratch, which is kind of like a place for a bunch of similar projects to be posted to. And the first step that you'll need to do, if you see in this PDF here, is to share your project. So I'll show you what it looks like in Scratch, but you'll click on a big orange share button. So if we go back into Scratch, this project is already shared, but I can unshare it really quick. And then I'll show you from inside the project. You can now see the big orange share button here. So you'll go ahead and click on that, and that'll save your project and share it, and it'll take you to this project page. Now you'll see a button that says add to studio, but that won't really help you. You'll need to follow a link. So if you see, there's a link here that says bit.ly/dunk contest, and that's also on this activity sheet, the step-by-step instructions. And if you have that open as a PDF, you can just go ahead and click on that. If not, you can start typing from the B here and just type in bit.ly/dunk contest. And don't forget the capital C here. But if you do click on it, it'll take you directly to our studio. Now nobody has posted any projects yet, but once you're here, you'll see this button that says add projects. So go ahead and click on that. And as long as you've shared a project like we did with that big orange share button and you're logged in, you should see any projects that you shared pop up in this bar down at the bottom. So you'll find the one, the dunk contest project that you just made, and hover your mouse over it and click add, and then you'll see it pop up in the studio. So wonderful job coding all of this. I can't wait to see everybody's work posted to the studio, and share it with the Coyote. Awesome. We'll see you next time.